to make foam props using the Moldstar 31T and Foam-iT 10 expanding rigid foam. Now here you can see our model on the left with a casting on the right, and you can see that they are 100% identical and that all the detail has transferred in our casting, and because we used metal powder, we were able to polish it up and make it look like actual metal props. For our casting, we ended up using the Foam-iT 10 because it's super lightweight yet very strong, and it's going to give us a very rigid yet durable prop. Now, this project I wanted to approach a little bit differently. We're not going to clay up all our models. Instead, we're going to use alginate to do the separation line or the clay up of the model. And for that, we need to set up our models pretty precise. So you can see here that all the models are set up with a split line halfway off the model on the same plane, on the same level. And that is because we're going to fill up our mold box to that level with the alginate to create the actual separation line. And now we can jump into and quickly assemble a mold box around our model. And the reason I'm using plexiglas here is simply so you guys can actually see into the mold box as we're working with this. Now, usually when making two-part molds, I would clay up the model halfway in clay, and usually takes me a long time to do that. Today I want to show you a different approach, and for this we're going to be using the AccuCast 390 bucket gel. This is an alginate material. It mixes with water. It has a work time of 3 minutes. That's the 390 is the temperature of the water that you should be working with. So if you have 90-degree water, it's going to take 3 minutes for the material to set up fully. This, on the other hand, lends itself really well for the mold making process when you don't have time. So within 3 to 10 minutes, I can have my first half of the mold already set up and done, where usually it would take me much, much longer just to set up that oil-based clay. So this is a huge benefit whenever you're working with models, usually flat models, that allow you to do this technique. So we want to make sure that we use the accurate temperature for the water. And here you can see me testing and checking the water temperature to make sure I actually have 3 minutes to work with. Now, this is a 3:2 mix ratio on the water to powder by volume, and then we're going to simply mix it using a mechanical mixer with a drill, and we're going to sift the AccuCast alginate into the water and then mix it thoroughly using the mechanical mixer. Now, keep in mind you have 3 minutes of work time at 90 degrees water temperature. And now we can simply pour that alginate slowly into our mold box, making sure we don't go over the model. And we're going to pour pretty much up to the half of the prop. So we don't want to sink it. We want to just go up to half of the actual object. Now this has allowed a full 3 minutes to cure before we jump in and cut some vents and pour spouts in this. Here I'm using a sculpting tool, and because this is alginate, it's very easy to cut, and I'm simply going to trace where I want to put my vents. As you can see here, we're going to pour into the handle. That's our pour spout, and then the vents are going to come up through the spike and the bolt on either side. And here you can see also I'm cutting some keys into the actual alginate. This is going to help our mold align together with the other half perfectly. To give you a good perspective on the time savings using the alginate for this separation line here is tremendous, basically, where it would take me usually about 2-3 hours to clay this up, put the keys in. It only took me about 5 minutes to put the mold box together, mix the material, pour it, and have it already be set and ready to receive the silicone. So the time savings using the alginate on a nice flat object like these props here is tremendous. Now we can go ahead and mix our Moldstar 31T. Now this product is a 1-to-1 mix ratio by volume. So we don't need to use a gram scale here, which is very convenient. Now, the working time of the material is 5 minutes, and a full cure is achieved after 23 minutes. Because I used 3 cups total water, gave me a pretty good idea how much material I'm going to need for the first half of my mold. So I'm going to need a total of 3 cups, 16-ounce cups here. And I'm going to dispense the part A and then going to dispense the part B off the Moldstar 31T, equal quantity. And then we're going to combine the 2 products together and mix them thoroughly. Again, you're going to hear me say this over and over again. You want to mix really good. This material is translucent, so it's no indicator when you actually mixed enough or thoroughly. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix it by scraping the sides and then scraping the bottom of the container. And we're going to repeat this by transferring the material then into a second mixing container and repeat that procedure. Always keeping in mind that we have 5 minutes of work time. So from the time the A and B come together, you have 5 minutes to mix and pour into your mold box. So here again, scrape the sides and then scrape the bottom of your mixing container. And then we're pretty much ready to go. Again, there's no clear indicator when you mixed this product thoroughly, so make sure you do it the right way. And we can now simply go ahead and pour the material into our mold box right over the alginate. The water in the alginate will not inhibit the cure of the silicone, and because it has a really fast setup time, it has no chance to interact with each other. Now, once the material is poured, we're going to allow it a full cure of 23 minutes. All right, it's been 23 minutes later, and we're ready to demold our first half of the mold. And you can see here how easily that alginate comes off of our model. So there you have it, very nice. And we have everything sunk into the first half of our mold halfway. Now, to release the second half of our mold, we're going to be using the Ease Release 205. This is the liquid version of the 200 release agent for silicone to silicone applications. And because I'm applying fresh silicone to silicone that's still green, so it hasn't been cured for very long, it's really important to use this liquid and much more concentrated version of the Ease Release 200. So use the Ease Release 205 whenever you have fresh material, fresh silicone you're working with. Now the release agent is allowed 15 minutes to dry. Make sure it doesn't pool. Then we can go ahead and reassemble our mold box around that first half of the mold and go ahead and dispense the silicone, mix it just like we did in the first step. Always double mix your materials, especially when they're clear, when you cannot tell by a color if they're thoroughly mixed or not. So once again, secondary mixing container, scrape the sides, scrape the bottom of your mixing container, and then we're ready to pour that into our mold box. And we're going to go slowly here. This technique is called needling, so we let the material pour in a thin stream, and it helps break some of those air bubbles. Always pour in one spot and let the material seek its own way over the model, and that will prevent any kind of air bubbles on the surface of your model. It will just push them away. Now the material is allowed, again, a full cure, 23 minutes. And then we can go ahead and demold our props, our original models, and get ready for the casting. Now that the mold is open, we can go ahead and remove those vents and pour spout that we cut into the alginate earlier. So if you remember, we cut the air vents, the keys, and the pour spout into the alginate, and then we casted silicone into them, creating a positive. Now that we have the entire mold open, those positives can be cut away to actually create the pour spout and create those air vents. Keep in mind, you don't want to cut away the keys that we made, so make sure you distinguish between the keys and your air vents. Now for the casting procedure here, I'm using the Foam-iT 10. This is a rigid foam. It has a mixed ratio of 1:1 by volume, so that's what we're going to go with. But you do want to keep in mind that the foams do have an extremely short pot life. This is 1.5 minute work time with a full cure of 2 hours. While the expansion rate of the Foam-it 10 is 6 times its original liquid volume. Now the color is beige, so if you need to have the material darker, make sure you add some So Strong or So UVO pigments. Now, besides the foam, we're going to be using nickel silver powder. This is real metal powder. So there are a few different cold casting techniques out there that you can use. The one that we're going to be employing here is the powdering of the mold, which means that our metal powder is going to be at the very outer layer of the casting, not within the actual casting medium. So we're not mixing any powder within our foam. Now, because we're using a dusting technique in the mold with the metal powder, you have to understand that there's only a very thin layer of the actual metal powder on the outer skin, if you want to call it that, of your casting. So what that means is you actually press too hard into the casting when you're buffing it with the steel wool. You can actually rub away, scratch away that outer layer, and it will show the resin underneath, or in this case the foam. And actually you can go even further and damage the surface of your casting if you press too hard into it, because you're actually using an abrasive material, the steel wool. So whenever you're doing the dusting technique with metal powders, make sure you go light on the buffing of your casting. Here you can see what that powder looks like in its raw form. So it's literally a powder that you can brush into the mold. We're going to sprinkle some of this into our molds, into the actual casting pieces. You don't need it all over the mold, just in the pieces you're actually casting. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to be doing a dusting technique of our mold with the metal powder. The metal powders are very expensive, so we want to minimize the use of them, and this technique allows just for that. Now, because the silicone is very static, it's going to cling to the metal powder that we brush into the mold. And again, the excess can be recycled, reclaimed, so we're not going to throw that out. Usually, metal powders are mixed into resins, epoxies, and sometimes even foams, and then casted into the mold, and then are present throughout the casting or even throughout the first layer. Sometimes people back it up with just basic resin without any metal powder. Either way, both of those techniques would take a lot more metal powder to cast, to use for this kind of casting, whereby the dusting technique uses a small fraction of that. And then one little tip here is that you don't want to just throw this powder away. As you know, the metal powders can be quite expensive. So to repurpose, reclaim the powder, we're going to simply shake out the excess metal powder onto a paper sheet, and then we're going to put that back into the jar of the material. So there's a little money-saving tip for you guys out there making these kinds of props. Now, to make our prop really nice and hard and rigid, we're going to embed a glass fiber rod in into our casting that has been simply cut down from a longer rod that you can get at any hardware store. Now, our mold is being clammed into 2 pieces of melamine board using some basic clamps. We have put these around the perimeter of our mold. And then we can go ahead and mix the Foam-it 10. Now, like I mentioned, the Foam-it 10 is a 1-to-1 mix ratio by volume, so we can simply mark our cups. And if you worked with foams before, you do know that we need to pre-mix them thoroughly. If you don't, it's always written on the labels or top of the cap. So we're going to shake these up quite thoroughly. And then I'm going to add 2 drops of the So Strong urethane pigment into the part B. Now, the pigment is thoroughly mixed into the part B, and then we can go ahead and dispense our part A, equal quantity, equal amount. And then we're going to mix the two components together. Now, again, with the foams, they're extremely short work times, 1.5 minutes. And one thing to note here is that you want to whip in as much air into the mixture as possible. So air is actually your friend here. So we're going to whip this like it's pancake batter. And again, scrape the sides, scrape the bottom, make sure that all the material is thoroughly combined, and then get that material quickly into our mold. Once the material is poured into the mold, we can then insert that glass rod that we cut down earlier to reinforce the handle off the hammer so that the actual prop doesn't break, because the handle of the hammer is actually quite thin. And here you can see the material, the foam rising out of the mold, and that kind of ensures us that the mold was filled, and we're going to allow this now a full cure for 2 hours before demolding. Now, after 2 hours, our castings are ready to be demolded, and you can see here how easy those pop out of our molds. And the flashing is very minimal and can be easily broken with a hand or scraped with a razor blade. And here's our prop hammer. You can see it looks accurate to the detail, and now some of that flashing is easily trimmed using a razor knife, like I mentioned. So once that is all trimmed away, we can go ahead and buff our casting to bring some of that metal shine out. For the buffing of the prop, we're going to be using steel wool. This is 000 steel wool. And then when you're actually buffing, you don't want to be pressing too hard into it. You just want to lightly buff it to bring out that shine without damaging the surface. It is foam, so if you buff too hard and you press too hard, you're going to actually scratch to the outer surface and kind of ruin the casting. Now, this would be a little bit different if you're using a resin, and you could actually press into the resin, but even with that, you want to be aware that you don't buff away the outer layer of the metal powder. So, and here we have the end result of our project with the original models on the left and the absolutely identical castings on the right that are actually super lightweight and made out of foam. And here you can see the final casting and how realistic it looks with that metal powder in it. And also a quick test here. Make sure that it's actually really impact resistant, and you can see me just hammering that thing away, and it's for sure going to last a long time. You can see that the prop hammer, while being extremely lightweight and can be handled easily by 1 or 2 fingers, is also extremely durable and strong and will not easily break. Now, if you got inspired by this project and you'd like to give your own projects a go and need some material, you can visit any one of our distributors around the world. So, and there you have it, a simple step-by-step procedure that we use to make a very fast setting mold using the AccuCast 390 bucket gel and the MoldStar 31T. Now, if you have an idea about what we should do next, please let us know down in the comments below. And if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. Now, to keep up with our latest mold making and casting videos, remember to subscribe.